Hello and welcome. Find a quiet corner, take a deep breath, and let the noise of the world outside fade away for just a moment. Today, we're not just going to talk about psychology. We're going on an inner journey. We're going to step into the hidden chambers of our own minds, where unseen forces often guide our thoughts and feelings. Our journey is not about finding fault, but about finding freedom, the freedom that comes from a deeper awareness of ourselves. Have you ever wondered why you keep repeating the same patterns, or why you feel stuck in a loop of certain emotions? The answer often lies in the silent psychological traps we unknowingly fall into. These are not flaws in our character, but rather natural shortcuts our brains take to make sense of a complex world. They are the mental echoes and mirages that, if left unexamined, can subtly steer our lives in directions we never intended. Over the next few parts, we will explore 25 of these unseen traps, the mental snares that catch our hopes, our decisions, and our peace. Each one is a little secret of the mind, a hidden truth that, once brought into the light, can transform how you see yourself and the world around you. We'll uncover these patterns one by one, not as cold, academic lessons, but as gentle, healing melodies that resonate with the truths of your own experience. My hope is that as we explore these topics, you will feel a sense of recognition, a moment of so that's what's been happening, and that this newfound awareness will be a first step toward a more conscious and fulfilling life. So, are you ready to begin? Let's take the first step together. Imagine a small bird, perhaps a sparrow, pecking at its reflection in a still puddle. It sees a mirror image of itself and, convinced it has found another of its kind, it continues to peck, chirp, and interact with the illusion. The bird isn't looking for something new, it's simply seeking a response from what it already knows. This image, this little illusion, is a perfect metaphor for the silent trap of confirmation bias, a trap that keeps us pecking at our own reflections and mistaking them for the vast, dynamic world. It's the psychological tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that aligns with our pre-existing beliefs, while dismissing information that contradicts them. This isn't a conscious, malicious act. It's a fundamental shortcut our brains use to maintain a sense of order and consistency. It feels safe and right, but its long-term effects can be profoundly limiting. In nature, a creature's instinct is often to seek what is familiar and safe. A deer will follow the same path to the watering hole. A fish will return to the same breeding grounds. This ingrained pattern seeking is a survival mechanism designed to conserve energy and avoid danger. It works beautifully in the wild, where a known path is a safe path. But for us, this same instinct can become a cage. We, too, seek out what is familiar. But our familiar is not a path. It is an idea, a belief, a worldview. We find ourselves drawn, like that little sparrow, to information, people, and experiences that reflect our existing convictions. We subscribe to news sources that tell us what we already believe. We follow social media accounts that echo our opinions, and we surround ourselves with people who see the world just as we do. The algorithm of our digital lives, in particular, has become a master architect of these echo chambers, serving us a curated diet of content that reinforces our existing views and shielding us from the discomfort of alternative perspectives. This is where the natural survival instinct begins to trap us. The path we follow is not a path to a watering hole, but a closed loop of thought. When we only seek out information that confirms our beliefs, we are actively, though often subconsciously, avoiding anything that might challenge them. We dismiss opposing viewpoints as uninformed or wrong without truly listening. Our minds, instead of being open fields ready to absorb new seeds of knowledge, become sealed echo chambers where our own thoughts bounce back to us, louder and more convincing each time. We are, in essence, having a conversation with a mirror, and the reflection is telling us exactly what we want to hear. The world outside the chamber, with its new ideas, its unexpected truths, and its potential for growth, remains unexplored and unknown. We become experts in our own echo, but strangers to the symphony of the world. This bias can manifest in everything, from a small-scale decision to a deeply held moral belief. You might be convinced a certain political policy is the best, and so you'll only read articles and listen to commentators who support it, while instantly dismissing anything critical as fake news. Or you may believe you are a failure at a specific task, and so you will disproportionately notice the times you stumble, while completely overlooking the small, quiet successes you achieve along the way. This mental shortcut feels comfortable because it reduces cognitive dissonance, the psychological stress we feel when faced with conflicting beliefs. By avoiding information that challenges us, we maintain a stable, predictable, and reassuring sense of reality. But this comfort comes at a great cost. It stunts our intellectual and emotional growth. It prevents us from genuinely understanding others, leading to division and misunderstanding. In a relationship, this might look like only remembering the moments that support your belief that your partner is unsupportive, while conveniently forgetting the many times they were there for you. On a larger scale, it's the root of much of the social and political polarization we see today. We aren't arguing with each other. We're often just shouting past each other from within our separate echo chambers. The powerful reveal of this trap is that it prevents us from evolving. True personal growth doesn't happen in the comfort of a sealed room. It happens when we step outside and expose ourselves to the elements. By consciously seeking out different perspectives, by truly listening to someone who disagrees with us, we are not abandoning our core beliefs. We are strengthening our minds. We are learning to hold a thought without necessarily accepting it, to listen to an opinion without internalizing it as our own. This practice, often called steelmanning, the other side's argument, means you don't just understand what they're saying. You understand it so well you could argue it yourself. This kind of intellectual humility is the antidote to confirmation bias. It requires courage, a willingness to be wrong, and the understanding that your identity is not tied to your current beliefs. The true benefit of breaking free from this trap is a mind that is more resilient, more compassionate, and infinitely more capable of navigating a complex world. When we stop pecking at our own reflections, we begin to see the vast, beautiful landscape of reality in all its nuanced glory. We discover that a different perspective isn't a threat, it's an opportunity. It's a chance to refine our own understanding, to see the world with a wider lens, and to connect with others on a deeper, more human level. In that moment of genuine curiosity and openness, we are no longer just surviving. We are truly living and growing, and the melody of a new, richer truth begins to fill the space where the echo once was. Have you ever watched a small stream flow over a rock? It doesn't fight the obstacle. It simply finds a way around, a new path, a gentle diversion. It maintains its flow, its purpose, its very nature. The water doesn't stop and declare the rock an insurmountable obstacle, a sign that its journey is doomed. It simply adapts. This natural fluid movement is a beautiful contrast to our human tendency to catastrophize, a psychological trap that turns a small stone in our path into a looming, impassable mountain. We inflate minor setbacks, predict the worst possible outcome, and then live in the shadow of that imagined disaster. In the natural world, a small rustle in the leaves might signal a predator, and the instinctual immediate response is to freeze or flee. This is a crucial, life-saving mechanism, a split-second leap to the worst-case scenario that ensures survival. But we, with our complex minds, have taken this ancient, protective instinct and applied it to every aspect of our lives, often without any real threat. The modern rustle in the leaves might be an email from your boss asking to chat, a friend not replying to a text, or a small mistake in a report. In these moments, instead of flowing around the obstacle like a stream, our minds stop and build an entire narrative of doom. That chat becomes a firing. The unreturned text becomes a ruined friendship. The mistake becomes a career-ending failure. We aren't just anticipating a negative outcome. We are fully living it, in vivid, fearful detail, before it has even occurred. The heart of this trap is that we confuse an outcome with an identity. We believe that if a bad thing happens, if we get fired, if a friendship ends, if we fail at a project, it is a reflection of who we are, a final, defining statement about our worth. This is the subtle but powerful lie our catastrophizing brain tells us. It whispers, if you fail, you are a failure. It doesn't say, you made a mistake on that report, but rather, you are incompetent. This intense personalization of events takes away our ability to see them for what they are: single, isolated occurrences that are part of the messy, unpredictable flow of life. It's like the stream pausing at a single rock and believing that its very identity as a flowing stream is now in jeopardy. This thought pattern not only creates a constant state of low-grade anxiety, but it also paralyzes us. If we are convinced that every path is fraught with a potential disaster of epic proportions, why would we ever dare to take a step? We avoid new challenges, shy away from difficult conversations, and choose inaction over the risk of imagined failure. The potential for a negative outcome feels so real and so painful that the safety of staying put becomes the only logical choice, even if it means sacrificing growth, opportunity, and joy. We build a mountain of shoulds in our minds, and then we sit at its base, too afraid to climb. We tell ourselves, I should have done better, or this shouldn't be happening. But these shoulds are a cage. They are a rigid set of rules we impose on a universe that operates with no such structure, and they leave us feeling helpless and victimized by every minor inconvenience. The transformative reveal here is that the mountain isn't real. The fear is real. The discomfort is real. But the catastrophic outcome we've built in our minds is an illusion. The power to dismantle this mountain lies in a practice of gentle, deliberate realism. We can learn to pause, breathe, and ask ourselves a simple question. Is this a stream and a rock, or am I building a mountain? We can challenge the automatic leap to the worst-case scenario by considering a more balanced range of possibilities. What is the most likely outcome? What is the least likely? And even if the worst-case scenario were to happen, is it truly the end of the world? Or would it simply be a difficult, but ultimately surmountable, challenge? The benefit of learning to navigate this trap is a profound sense of inner peace and resilience. By shrinking the mountain back down to a simple rock, we give ourselves permission to flow again. We learn that our worth is not tied to the outcomes of our efforts. We can make a mistake and still be competent. We can face a setback and still be strong. By releasing ourselves from the burden of the imagined disaster, we free up our energy to actually solve the real-world problem in front of us, rather than wrestling with a phantom. We begin to see life not as a series of potential catastrophes, but as a continuous, flowing journey, full of challenges and diversions, but always with the potential for a new, beautiful path forward. Have you ever observed a small bird frantically pecking at a window, seemingly unable to understand the invisible barrier? We might easily conclude that the bird is foolish, stubborn, or simply not very smart. We attribute its behavior to a fixed, internal characteristic, its nature. But the reality is that the bird is acting on a powerful, external influence, its reflection. It's not a foolish bird. It's a bird responding to an environmental stimulus. This simple observation holds a profound lesson for us, for it perfectly illustrates a silent and common trap we fall into: the fundamental attribution error. It is our powerful tendency to judge others harshly based on their actions, attributing their behavior to their personality or character, while conveniently excusing our own similar behavior by blaming the situation. This cognitive bias is a deeply ingrained shortcut, a way our minds simplify a complex world. When we see someone cut us off in traffic, our immediate thought isn't, "Perhaps they're rushing to the hospital," or "Maybe they didn't see me." Instead, we jump to the conclusion, "What a jerk," or "They're so inconsiderate." We make a fundamental attribution about their character, that they are a bad person, or a reckless driver, without considering the myriad of external factors that might be at play. We see the actor, not the forces acting upon them. Yet, when we are the ones running late and speeding, we rationalize it away with a flood of situational excuses. "I'm late for an important meeting. The traffic was terrible. I had an emergency." We are quick to offer ourselves grace and context, but we rarely extend the same courtesy to others. This trap is not a sign of a bad heart. It's a feature of a busy mind. Our brains are wired to create a coherent story, and attributing a person's behavior to their character is the simplest, most efficient narrative. It requires less mental energy than considering the countless situational variables, the person's history, their current stress levels, or the context of their day. This is particularly true when we are observing strangers. We don't have access to their inner world, their struggles, or their motivations. So we fill in the blanks with the most convenient and often most negative assumption. This is how stereotypes are born and perpetuated. We see one person act a certain way, attribute it to an immutable characteristic of their group, and then use that single instance to paint an entire population. The fundamental attribution error is the invisible brush we use to paint a world in broad, simple, and often inaccurate strokes. The emotional and relational cost of this error is immense. It builds walls between people, fuels conflict, and erodes empathy. When we operate from a place of fundamental attribution, we stop seeing the full humanity of the other person. We don't see a father rushing to pick up his child. We see a rude driver, We don't see a colleague who is overwhelmed and stressed. We see a lazy employee. This creates a cycle of judgment and defensiveness. When we feel judged, we tend to put up our guard, making it even harder for others to see our own situational struggles. The very lack of empathy we feel for others is the same lack of empathy we often crave from them. The trap is a mirror. We project our own self-forgiving standards onto others and are often met with the same unforgiving judgment we ourselves dole out. The transformative reveal of this psychological trap is that it holds the key to a more compassionate and understanding life. The antidote to the fundamental attribution error is a conscious and deliberate practice of curiosity and empathy. Instead of jumping to a conclusion, we can learn to pause and ask, what else could be true? This simple question forces us to step out of our own perspective and consider the unseen forces at play in someone else's life. It encourages us to look for the reflection on the window, rather than simply blaming the bird. It means acknowledging that people, like us, are complex beings responding to a dynamic world. Not just static characters in our personal narrative. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a profound shift in how we relate to the world. By consciously challenging our first, most simplistic judgments, we open the door to genuine connection and understanding. We learn to see the situational context that shapes behavior, both in others and in ourselves, which allows us to let go of harsh self-criticism as well. We become less quick to anger and more open to compassion. This doesn't mean excusing genuinely harmful behavior, but it does mean approaching the world with a sense of grace and humility, recognizing that we all have a story, and that story is often far more complex than the single action we observe. By breaking free from the mirror of misjudgment, we begin to see a world full of people, not just characters. And in that moment, the bonds of empathy can finally begin to grow. Imagine a ship captain sailing toward a dangerous storm. The captain knows, deep down, that continuing on this path is reckless, but they have already invested weeks of travel, a vast sum of money, and countless hours of their crew's labor. Turning back now would mean admitting all of that effort was a waste. The cost of their journey. A silent siren whispers, "You've already come so far. You can't give up now." So, the captain pushes forward, not because the destination is worth the risk, but because the past investment feels too heavy to abandon. This vivid image perfectly captures the essence of the sunk cost fallacy, a powerful psychological trap where we continue a failing endeavor simply because of the time, money, or effort we have already invested. In the natural world, a creature's decision-making is often based on the present moment and the potential future reward. A fox, having spent an hour digging for a mouse and finding nothing, will abandon that hole and start a new one. It doesn't dwell on the hour it wasted. It simply reevaluates the situation and optimizes its chances for a future meal. It operates on a simple, elegant logic: the past is past, and the only thing that matters is the path forward. We, however, are far more attached to our past efforts. We are not foxes in the field. We are captains on a ship, and our decisions are often weighed down by the invisible anchor of our prior investments. This psychological phenomenon is rooted in our natural aversion to loss. We feel the pain of a loss far more intensely than we feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Admitting a past investment was a mistake, that the time or money was sunk and irretrievable, feels like a form of personal failure. So, instead of cutting our losses, we double down, hoping that just a little more effort will finally make the investment worthwhile. This trap is everywhere in our lives, from the mundane to the monumental. It's the book you're halfway through but hate, yet you continue reading because you already bought it. It's the old car that has cost you more in repairs than it's worth, but you keep fixing it because you've put so much into it. It's the relationship that has been unhealthy for years, but you stay because of the years you've already invested. In each of these scenarios, the past investment, the sunk cost, is no longer a relevant factor in the future outcome, but we treat it as if it is. We confuse our emotional attachment to the past with a logical reason for our present actions. The more we have put in, the more compelling the silent siren becomes, luring us deeper into the storm. The greatest cost of this trap isn't just the wasted time or money, it's the missed opportunities. By staying on a sinking ship, we miss the chance to board a new seaworthy vessel. The energy we pour into a failing project is energy we could have used to start a promising new one. The time we spend clinging to a stagnant relationship is time we could have used to find one that is genuinely fulfilling. The sunk cost fallacy makes us prisoners of our own past. It keeps us on a predetermined track, not because it's the right track, but because it feels like the only one we're allowed to be on. We forget that the future is not beholden to the past. It is a clean slate, a new ocean to navigate, filled with new possibilities. The transformative reveal of this trap is that your past is not a chain. It is a lesson. The antidote to the sunk cost fallacy is the radical acceptance that every investment you make, whether it's of time, money, or emotion, is a lesson, not a sentence. The key is to shift your focus from what has been lost to what can still be gained. Before making another incremental investment, ask yourself a simple, clarifying question. If I were starting from scratch today, with no prior investment, would I still make this choice? This question reframes the entire decision. It frees you from the emotional weight of the past and allows you to evaluate the present moment with a clear, forward-looking perspective. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater freedom and agility. By learning to recognize and release the silent siren of the sunk cost, you become a captain of your own ship, able to change course when necessary. You learn that letting go is not an admission of failure, but an act of courage and self-respect. It's the wisdom of the fox, recognizing that a dry hole is just a dry hole, and that the only path forward is to dig somewhere new. In freeing yourself from the weight of your irrevocable investments, you open up a world of new potential, allowing you to navigate toward a future that is not defined by past mistakes, but illuminated by present possibility. Think of a dense forest floor, where a sudden rainfall creates temporary streams and puddles. The water reflects the clouds, the trees, and the light. But it is not the sky itself. It is a temporary state, a reaction to the moment, and with time and sun, it will evaporate. Yet, in our minds, we often mistake our emotions, the temporary puddles of our psyche, for the solid, unchangeable reality of the sky. This is the essence of emotional reasoning, a psychological trap where we believe that because we feel something to be true, it must be true. Our feelings, like ghosts from our past, can trick us into believing they are objective truths, leading us to make decisions based on temporary emotions rather than a clear view of reality. In the natural world, a creature's emotions are a direct response to an immediate stimulus. Fear, for a gazelle, is a signal to run from a lion. It is a reaction to a real, present danger. But for us, with our highly evolved memories and imaginations, our emotions are not always tethered to the present moment. A feeling of anxiety can be a ghost of a past failure, a phantom fear of a future that may never come. A feeling of worthlessness can be a reflection of a critical voice from childhood, not a statement of our current value. The problem with emotional reasoning is that it elevates these feelings from what they are transient, subjective states to what they are not objective, factual statements about the world and ourselves. We tell ourselves, I feel like a failure, therefore I am a failure. We don't pause to question the source of the feeling. We simply accept it as an absolute truth. The danger of this trap lies in its ability to hijack our decision-making. When we are caught in the current of an intense emotion, our rational mind, which is responsible for logic and problem-solving, is often swept aside. We might make a rash decision to end a relationship out of temporary anger, or quit a job out of fleeting frustration. These decisions are not made from a place of clear-sighted wisdom, but from the turbulence of a passing storm. Emotional reasoning convinces us that the world is as our feelings describe it, even when the facts contradict that description. It's the voice that says, I feel sad, so there must be something fundamentally wrong with my life, ignoring all the positive aspects that are still present. This leads to a skewed perception of reality, where our emotional state colors everything we see, like looking at the world through a pair of tinted glasses. The more we engage in emotional reasoning, the more we reinforce the power of our feelings over our logic. It creates a self-perpetuating cycle. We feel an emotion, accept it as truth, and then act in a way that confirms that truth. For example, if you feel insecure about a friendship, emotional reasoning might lead you to believe, my friend doesn't care about me. This belief, in turn, might cause you to act distant or withdrawn, which could then lead your friend to reciprocate, thereby confirming your initial feeling. The ghost of your past pain becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in your present. This is not just a passing thought, it is a fundamental misinterpretation of our own internal experience, one that can lead to significant distress and prevent us from living a life guided by our values rather than our transient feelings. The transformative reveal of this trap is that your feelings are a compass, not a map. They can tell you where you are, but they cannot dictate where you must go. The antidote to emotional reasoning is to create a small but powerful space between your feelings and your actions. This is the space of conscious awareness and inquiry. When a strong feeling arises, instead of immediately accepting it as truth, you can learn to pause and ask, what am I feeling right now? And then, what are the facts of the situation? This practice helps you to see the feeling for what it is, a temporary emotional state, separate from the objective reality of the situation. It allows you to honor your feelings without being controlled by them. The benefit of applying this wisdom is the recovery of your inner power. By learning to distinguish between your feelings and the facts, you regain control over your decisions and your life. You learn that just because you feel something to be true doesn't mean you have to act on it. You can acknowledge the presence of a ghost from your past without letting it haunt your present. This allows you to respond to life with clarity and intention, rather than reacting from a place of emotional turbulence. You become the conscious observer of your inner world, rather than a passive victim of it. In this state of mind, you can finally hear the gentle, true melody of your own wisdom. A melody that is not a temporary reflection, but the deep, abiding truth of who you are. Picture a majestic waterfall cascading down a cliff. The water is a continuous, powerful flow, but if you were to try and capture it with a single, rigid frame, you would fail. The flow is not a perfect, static image. It is a dynamic, ever-changing process. It is a spectrum of movement, light, and sound. This image of the waterfall provides a stark contrast to our human tendency toward all-or-nothing thinking, a psychological trap that convinces us that the world, our lives, and ourselves exist only in extremes. We see things in black and white, success or failure, good or bad, with no room for the nuanced messy, and beautiful shades of gray in between. Anything less than perfect is considered a complete and utter failure. And this mental mirage leaves us chasing an impossible ideal while missing the genuine beauty of progress. This kind of thinking, often called dichotomous thinking, is a powerful mental shortcut. It simplifies a complex world into a neat binary system. It's an ancient survival mechanism. Rooted in our need to make rapid decisions is that a friend or foe, is this food safe or poisonous? But when we apply this rigid framework to our intricate modern lives, it becomes a cage. We tell ourselves, if I don't get a perfect score, I have failed. Or if I'm not completely happy, I must be completely miserable. The result is a constant state of internal conflict and dissatisfaction. We embark on a new diet and, after one small slip-up, we declare the entire effort a failure and give up completely. We try to be a more patient person and, after one moment of frustration, we conclude, I'm just a fundamentally impatient person. So what's the point? This is the mirage of perfection. We create an unattainable standard, and then use our inevitable failure to meet it as evidence that we are flawed and should simply give up. The emotional toll of all-or-nothing thinking is immense. It breeds a relentless inner critic that sees every stumble as a disaster and every success as incomplete. It robs us of the joy of progress, the pride of effort, and the gentle satisfaction of incremental growth. It keeps us on a painful emotional roller coaster, swinging from the temporary high of an all moment to the crushing low of a nothing moment. This binary worldview doesn't just apply to our actions, it extends to our identity. We label ourselves as a success or a failure, a good person or a bad person, completely ignoring the vast complexities and contradictions that make us human. We fail to recognize that we can be a kind person who occasionally loses their temper, or a hard-working person who sometimes needs a day of rest. This trap strips us of our self-compassion and leaves us with a fragile sense of self, one that is constantly at risk of shattering with every perceived flaw. The powerful reveal of this trap is that life is not a switch that is either on or off. It is a spectrum, a fluid and continuous flow. The antidote to all-or-nothing thinking is the conscious cultivation of nuance and a deep appreciation for the process over the outcome. It is the recognition that success is not a singular point of arrival, but a long and winding road with many small, meaningful steps. We can learn to reframe our internal dialogue to include the word, and instead of saying, I failed, we can say, I made a mistake, and I also learned something valuable. Instead of I'm a bad person, we can say, I did something I regret, and I am also capable of kindness and growth. This simple linguistic shift can begin to rewire our brains, allowing us to hold two seemingly contradictory truths at the same time and embrace the full reality of our imperfect humanity. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a profound sense of peace and resilience. By letting go of the mirage of perfection, you free yourself from the self-imposed pressure to be flawless. You learn to celebrate small victories without needing them to be monumental triumphs. You learn that a setback is not a final destination, but simply a part of the journey. You begin to see the beauty in the messy, the imperfect, and the unfinished. Just as the waterfall is beautiful, precisely because it is a constant flow of motion, your life is beautiful because it is a continuous process of growth and becoming, not a static, perfect image. By escaping the all-or-nothing trap, you finally allow yourself to live in the rich and vibrant shades of reality, where every step, no matter how small, is a valid and worthy part of your path. Imagine a gambler in a casino, blowing on dice before a roll. Does the breath have any real effect on the outcome? Logically, we know it doesn't. The dice are a random, physical system governed by the laws of probability. And yet, in that moment, the gambler feels a powerful surge of hope and control. That gentle puff of air is not a physical act, it is a psychological one, an attempt to impose order on a chaotic universe. This compelling image is a perfect metaphor for the illusion of control, a psychological trap where we find comfort in believing we can influence random events, which gives us a false sense of security and power. In the vast theater of nature, a creature's survival is a delicate balance of skill, instinct, and pure chance. A bird of prey may soar for hours, hunting with perfect precision, but its success is not guaranteed. It must also contend with the whims of the wind, the hidden movements of its prey, and 1,000 other variables beyond its control. In these moments of uncertainty, a bird does not perform a ritual to ensure a successful hunt. It simply keeps hunting. We, however, with our highly developed brains, crave a sense of predictability and agency. We find the idea of a purely random, chaotic world deeply unsettling. Our minds are narrative-making machines. We seek cause and effect, even where none exists. This is the birthplace of superstition. We create a link between a behavior and an outcome, even if there is no real connection. For example, wearing a lucky shirt to an important meeting, avoiding cracks in the sidewalk, or a student believing that studying with a specific pen will guarantee a good grade. These rituals give us a feeling of agency and reduce the anxiety that comes with facing uncertainty, but they do so at the cost of our rational thinking. The danger of this trap is that it can prevent us from learning what actually works. If we believe a lucky charm is the reason for our success, we may not take the time to analyze our actual preparation, our hard work, and the real skills we use to achieve that success. We attribute a positive outcome to a meaningless ritual, rather than to our own competence. Conversely, if something bad happens and we attribute it to bad luck or a broken ritual, we fail to learn from our mistakes. This prevents us from truly understanding the world and our role in it. The illusion of control creates a mental fog, obscuring the genuine drivers of success and failure. It can also lead to a deep sense of helplessness. If we believe that a specific ritual is the only way to achieve an outcome, then when that ritual is impossible or fails, we are left feeling powerless and without recourse. Our sense of self-efficacy, the belief in our own ability to succeed, becomes tied to external, non-existent forces rather than our internal strength and skills. The transformative reveal of this trap is that true power lies not in controlling the uncontrollable, but in accepting the beautiful, terrifying uncertainty of life. The antidote to the illusion of control is the practice of differentiating between what we can influence and what we cannot. We can influence our preparation, our effort, our attitude, and our resilience. We cannot influence the flip of a coin, the outcome of a game, or the random events of the universe. This distinction is crucial. It frees us from the burden of trying to control the uncontrollable and allows us to focus our energy on what truly matters, mastering our own response to whatever comes our way. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a profound sense of inner calm and genuine power. By releasing our need to control the random, we become more resilient and adaptable. We learn that success is not about manipulating fate, but about putting in the work and then accepting the outcome, whatever it may be. We can still hope for the best, but our self-worth is no longer tied to the result. We become like the master archer who focuses on their form, their breath, and their aim, and then lets the arrow fly, knowing that the journey of the arrow is now its own. This is the path to a life where our confidence is built on a solid foundation of competence and self-trust, not on the fragile illusion of control. We find peace in the acceptance of what is, and power in the action of what we can do. Imagine a single moth fluttering in the vast moonlit night. Does the entire forest floor pause to watch its clumsy flight? Do the other creatures notice every slight misstep, every awkward turn? No. The moth's presence is a tiny and fleeting event in a world filled with countless other movements and sounds. This simple image offers a powerful mirror to our own minds, revealing a common psychological trap, the spotlight effect. This is our deep-seated belief that we are constantly under scrutiny, an invisible spotlight following our every move, and that others notice our mistakes, our appearance, and our imperfections far more than they actually do. In the natural world, a creature's focus is, by necessity, on its own survival and immediate environment. A deer is scanning for predators and food, not critically observing the flight pattern of a nearby bird. The very nature of existence requires a self-centered perspective. We, too, are the primary characters in our own life stories, and our minds are hardwired to process our own actions and feelings with a level of detail and intensity that is simply not replicated by anyone else. The problem arises when we project this internal focus onto the external world. We assume that because we are acutely aware of our own thoughts and actions, everyone else must be as well. We believe that the tiny coffee stain on our shirt is a glaring imperfection that everyone in the meeting will notice and judge. We are convinced that the awkward thing we said in a conversation is now the main topic of everyone else's thoughts. In truth, the audience is not a collective, judging gaze. It's a collection of individuals, each one primarily focused on their own internal world, their own coffee stain, and their own awkward conversation. The emotional cost of the spotlight effect is a constant, low-grade anxiety and a profound sense of self-consciousness. It paralyzes us from taking risks, from speaking our minds, and from simply being ourselves. We spend so much energy worrying about what others might be thinking that we lose touch with our own authentic self. This trap is particularly insidious because it is based on a fundamental miscalculation of human psychology. We are not the center of anyone else's universe. The reality is that people are far more preoccupied with their own lives, their own worries, and their own inner dialogues than they are with ours. The mistake you made, which feels like a catastrophic public failure to you, is likely a passing thought to someone else, if they even noticed it at all. The very people we imagine are judging us are often trapped in their own version of the spotlight effect, convinced that they are the ones being judged. The greatest danger of this trap is that it prevents genuine connection. When we are consumed by the fear of being seen and judged, we put up emotional walls. We become guarded, careful, and often silent, hoping that by making ourselves smaller, we will be less likely to be noticed or criticized. But it is in our vulnerability, our imperfections, and our willingness to be seen as we are that true connection is forged. No one is drawn to an emotionless, flawless character. We are drawn to real people, the ones who stumble and get back up, who admit their mistakes, and who are brave enough to be their authentic, imperfect selves. By living in the shadow of the invisible spotlight, we isolate ourselves, convinced that we are the only ones on stage, when in fact, we are all just members of the audience, cheering for the courage of those who dare to be real. The transformative reveal of this trap is that the stage is much, much bigger than you think. And the audience is not watching with judgment, but with their own preoccupations. The antidote to the spotlight effect is a deliberate practice of shifting your focus from your imagined audience to the present moment. Instead of worrying about what others are thinking, practice being fully present in the conversation, the task, or the experience. Remind yourself, with gentle compassion, that your inner world is not a public broadcast. And when you do make a mistake, instead of hiding, try a small act of vulnerability, a self-deprecating comment, a sincere apology, or a simple acknowledgement. These small acts can be incredibly liberating. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a profound sense of freedom and authenticity. By letting go of the invisible spotlight, you reclaim your energy and your focus. You can speak your mind, pursue your passions, and make mistakes without the paralyzing fear of public condemnation. You learn to walk through the world, not as a performer on a stage, but as a participant in a shared human experience. In this newfound freedom, you find the courage to be vulnerable, to be real, and to connect with others on a deeper level, where the quiet truth of our shared imperfection is not a source of fear, but a beautiful melody of acceptance and belonging. Picture a flock of birds, a murmuration, moving in a single, mesmerizing wave across the sky. Thousands of individual birds turn in unison, creating a breathtaking display of collective motion. The beauty of this phenomenon lies in its seamless, cooperative nature. Yet, if one bird, perhaps sensing a predator, changes direction, the others instinctively follow, sometimes without seeing the threat themselves. This collective instinct, a powerful survival mechanism in nature, has a dark parallel in human psychology, the trap of groupthink. It is the powerful and often silent pressure to conform to group opinion, even when we have internal doubts, leading to decisions that are not based on individual reason, but on the fear of rocking the boat. In the wild, this conformity is a matter of life and death. A herd of antelopes running in a single direction provides safety in numbers. A straying individual is more likely to be caught by a predator. For us, the predator is often social rejection, our deep-seated need for belonging, for social acceptance, is a fundamental human drive. For most of our evolutionary history, being ostracized from the tribe meant certain death. And while our modern lives are not dictated by the same primal risks, the fear of social isolation is still a powerful emotional force. This fear is the engine of groupthink. When we are in a group, whether it's a family, a friend circle, a workplace team, or a political party, we often find ourselves suppressing our own unique ideas, questions, or concerns in order to maintain harmony and avoid conflict. We mistake silence for agreement, and we often convince ourselves that the group's consensus must be right, simply because everyone else seems to be on board. The danger of this trap is that it leads to flawed, and sometimes catastrophic, decision-making. When a group prioritizes conformity over critical thinking, the collective intelligence of the individuals is not just minimized, it's neutralized. Everyone is a passenger, assuming someone else is steering the ship. In a workplace meeting, for example, a new, risky project might be proposed. An individual might have a crucial question about the budget or a fatal flaw in the plan, but they remain silent because no one else is speaking up. They assume their question is stupid, or that the others must have already considered and dismissed the issue. The result is a decision made without the benefit of all the available information, one that could have been avoided if just one person had found the courage to speak their truth. Groupthink leads to a chilling effect on creativity and innovation. The path of least resistance becomes the only path, and new, divergent ideas are often met with subtle or overt disapproval. The emotional toll of groupthink is a profound sense of inner conflict and the gradual erosion of self-trust. When we repeatedly suppress our own voice in favor of the group's, we begin to lose touch with our own intuition and convictions. We start to doubt our own judgment, and our identity becomes intertwined with the group's. Over time, we may not even realize we are conforming. We simply believe the group's opinion is our own. This leaves us feeling hollow, as if we are living a life that is not entirely ours, and it can lead to a simmering resentment that, if left unaddressed, can eventually boil over. We become like the individual bird in the murmuration, blindly following the crowd without knowing why or where we're going. The transformative reveal of this trap is that true belonging is not found in conformity, but in authentic contribution. The antidote to groupthink is the conscious practice of fostering psychological safety within a group, and the personal courage to be a devil's advocate. This does not mean being contrary for the sake of it, but rather approaching every decision with a humble curiosity. It means asking questions like, "What have we not considered?" Or, "Let's assume this idea is wrong. How would we prove it?" This kind of thoughtful dissent is not a form of disloyalty. It is an act of deep care for the group's well-being and success. It is a recognition that the truth is often found in the tension of diverse perspectives, not in the comfort of a single, uniform opinion. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater integrity and purpose. By finding the courage to speak your truth, you not only empower yourself, but you also empower others to do the same. You create an environment where genuine, robust discussion is possible, leading to stronger relationships and better outcomes. You learn that your unique perspective is not a burden to be hidden, but a gift to be shared. By breaking free from the shadow of the crowd, you stop being a follower and start being a true contributor. And in that moment, you find a sense of belonging that is not based on silent agreement, but on the rich, resonant melody of your own authentic voice. Imagine a squirrel meticulously burying nuts for the winter. It has a plan: dig a hole, place the nut, cover it up. Simple, efficient, and direct. The squirrel doesn't get sidetracked by a sudden desire to build an elaborate, multi-chambered burrow. It doesn't underestimate the time it will take to dig the hole. Its plan is based on a realistic assessment of its time and resources. This simple, instinctual efficiency stands in stark contrast to our human tendency toward the planning fallacy, a psychological trap where we universally underestimate the time, resources, and potential challenges required to complete a task. We optimistically believe our projects will unfold in a straight, predictable line, leading to stress, disappointment, and a continuous cycle of procrastination and rushed work. This bias is rooted in our optimistic nature and our powerful ability to visualize a desired future. When we set out to do something, write a report, plan a party, renovate a room, we envision the end result. We see the finished report, the happy guests, the beautifully painted wall. Our minds are so focused on this ideal end state that they often skip over the messy, unpredictable details of the process itself. We fail to account for the inevitable obstacles: the unexpected phone call, the unforeseen technical issue, the need to stop and eat, sleep, and rest. We assume a best-case scenario timeline is the only timeline, and we plan our lives around a frictionless, idealized version of reality that simply doesn't exist. We tell ourselves, I can get this entire project done in 2 hours, completely ignoring the fact that it took us an hour just to gather the materials last time. The emotional and practical costs of the planning fallacy are immense. It puts us in a constant state of pressure and disappointment. We are always running behind, always feeling as though we are failing to meet our own unrealistic deadlines. This creates a cycle of stress that can lead to burnout. It also fosters a sense of learned helplessness. When we consistently fail to meet our self-imposed timelines, we begin to believe we are bad at planning, or even worse, that we are lazy or incompetent. We internalize the failure without ever questioning the flawed premise of our original plan. This can lead to procrastination, as the daunting task of meeting an impossible deadline feels overwhelming before we even begin. We may put off starting a project because our minds, on a deeper level, already know we can't possibly finish it in the time we've allotted. This trap doesn't just affect our personal lives, it has wide-reaching consequences in business and society. Countless large-scale construction projects go over budget and over schedule, not because of malicious intent, but because of a collective planning fallacy. We are all squirrels who, instead of simply burying nuts, have convinced ourselves we can build a complex dam in an afternoon, only to be surprised when the day ends and the dam is nowhere near complete. The tragedy is that this trap isn't about a lack of discipline. It's about a lack of realistic self-awareness. We fail to remember that we are human beings with limitations, not robots who can work with perfect, uninterrupted efficiency. The transformative reveal of this trap is that a good plan is not a straight line, but a resilient map that accounts for the inevitable detours. The antidote to the planning fallacy is a conscious and compassionate practice of pre-mortem planning. Instead of just imagining what success looks like, take a moment to imagine that the project has already failed. Ask yourself, what went wrong? What were the obstacles we didn't foresee? This exercise forces you to consider the variables you would normally ignore. Another powerful practice is to break down large tasks into their smallest, most granular components. A project that takes 2 hours might actually be composed of 10 different small tasks that each take 15 minutes, with built-in time for breaks, distractions, and unforeseen issues. This approach forces you to confront the true scope of the work and to build a more honest and realistic timeline. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of less stress and greater success. By learning to create realistic plans, you stop setting yourself up for failure. You begin to feel a sense of accomplishment as you meet your goals, which, in turn, boosts your confidence and motivation. You learn that success isn't about finishing a race in a single, impossible sprint, but about a steady, mindful jog with a clear understanding of the road ahead. By breaking free from the weight of tomorrow and the illusion of a perfect timeline, you reclaim your present, allowing yourself the time, grace, and space to do good work and to enjoy the journey, not just the destination. Imagine a hermit crab that has outgrown its shell. The shell is now a bit too small, a little too heavy, and a lot less comfortable than it used to be. Yet, the crab stays, clinging to the familiar protection of a home that no longer serves it. It knows the shell's every nook and cranny, the feeling of its worn edges, and the safety it provides. The daunting prospect of searching for a new, better shell is filled with the risk of exposure and the uncertainty of what might lie ahead. This vivid image of the crab perfectly illustrates the status quo bias, a psychological trap that reveals our innate aversion to change, even when it would be beneficial. We cling to the comfortable and known, often at the expense of growth and a better future. This bias is deeply rooted in our brain's desire to conserve energy and avoid risk. Our minds are built to be efficient, and making a change, whether it's a small change, like trying a new coffee shop, or a big one, like changing careers, requires mental effort, deliberation, and the potential for regret. Sticking with the status quo, on the other hand, is effortless. It requires no thought, no decision, and carries no immediate risk of a negative outcome. Our brains interpret change as a potential loss, and because we feel the pain of a loss far more intensely than the pleasure of an equivalent gain, we often choose the safe, predictable path of inaction. The current situation, even if it's flawed, feels like a known quantity, a comfortable old blanket. The potential for a new, better situation is just that, a potential, and it comes with the risk that it might be worse. This perceived risk, often magnified by our fear, outweighs the clear benefits of a new path. The emotional and practical costs of the status quo bias are subtle but significant. In our personal lives, it's the reason we might stay in a job that makes us miserable, clinging to the familiar routine and the devil we know. It's the reason we stick with old, unhealthy habits, because the effort of creating new, healthy ones feels too overwhelming. It's the reason we remain in stagnant relationships, not because they are fulfilling, but because the thought of being alone or starting over feels terrifying. On a larger scale, this bias can stunt innovation in a company, preventing it from adopting new technologies or strategies that would be beneficial in the long run. The phrase, "but we've always done it this way," is the anthem of the status quo bias, a melody that lulls us into a state of comfortable stagnation. The danger of this trap is that it turns our comfort zone into a prison. The world is in a constant state of flux, and a refusal to change means we are slowly, but surely falling behind. What feels safe and comfortable today can become a liability tomorrow. The hermit crab that refuses to seek a new shell will eventually find itself vulnerable to predators and constrained by its own growth. We, too, can become so attached to a failing system, a toxic routine, or an unfulfilling life that we fail to see the opportunities passing us by. The fear of stepping into the unknown becomes so great that we begin to justify our inaction, convincing ourselves that our current imperfect state is actually the best we can hope for. The transformative reveal of this trap is that comfort is a temporary state, and true security is found in adaptability, not in stasis. The antidote to the status quo bias is to consciously cultivate a sense of curiosity and a willingness to embrace the uncomfortable. This doesn't mean making reckless changes, but rather taking small, deliberate steps outside of your comfort zone. Start with something small. Try a new food, take a different route home, or read a book on a topic you know nothing about. These small acts of courage help to rewire your brain, teaching it that change is not a threat, but an opportunity for discovery and growth. Another powerful practice is to conduct a zero-based thought experiment. For any given aspect of your life, your job, your relationships, your routines, ask yourself, if I were starting this from scratch today, would I make the same choice? This question frees you from the emotional weight of your past and allows you to evaluate your current situation with a fresh, objective perspective. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of continuous growth and boundless possibility. By breaking free from the comfort of the familiar, you learn that your true strength lies not in the safety of a worn-out shell, but in your ability to seek out new ones. You learn to see change not as a risk, but as a necessary and beautiful part of the human journey. You become like the confident hermit crab, willing to shed its old home in pursuit of a better fit, trusting that the universe holds new opportunities just waiting to be discovered. In this state of mind, you stop living a life of quiet resignation and begin to live a life of vibrant, intentional evolution. Consider a single, beautiful songbird singing a complex and joyful melody. Because its song is so beautiful, we might assume that the bird must also be intelligent, a good parent, and possess a gentle nature. We take one positive attribute, its beautiful song, and allow it to cast a shimmering halo over our entire perception of the creature. This mental shortcut, known as the halo effect, is a powerful psychological trap where our initial positive or negative impression of a person, object, or idea influences our judgment of their other qualities, clouding our ability to see them clearly. This bias is a natural, almost subconscious attempt by our brains to simplify the overwhelming amount of information we encounter every day. We don't have the time or energy to thoroughly evaluate every single person we meet on every possible trait. So, our minds take a powerful, salient characteristic like physical attractiveness, a charming personality, or a prestigious job title, and use it as a proxy for all other characteristics. A person who is physically attractive is more likely to be perceived as intelligent, kind, and trustworthy. A well-dressed person is often assumed to be more competent. We allow a single, dominant trait to create a cohesive, and often inaccurate, narrative about a person, ignoring the subtle complexities and contradictions that make them who they are. The reverse is also true. This is the horns effect. One negative trait, a stern face, an awkward laugh, or a single mistake can cast a negative shadow, leading us to believe the person is less intelligent, less kind, or less capable than they truly are. The emotional and social costs of the halo effect are immense. In the workplace, a charismatic but incompetent leader might be promoted because their charm creates a halo of perceived competence, while a quiet, brilliant employee is overlooked because their lack of social prowess casts a negative shadow. In our personal lives, this bias can lead us to form friendships or romantic relationships with people based on a single, appealing trait, only to discover later that the person's other qualities are not what we assumed them to be. It's the reason we might idolize a celebrity based on their public image, only to feel profound disappointment when their private life is revealed to be messy and flawed. We are not seeing the whole person. We are seeing a projection of our own positive assumptions. This trap prevents us from engaging with people on a deeper, more authentic level. It keeps us from truly seeing the full, nuanced, and often contradictory reality of another human being. We are constantly in a state of judging a book by its cover, and in doing so, we miss the richness of the story within. The greatest danger of this trap is that it blinds us to the truth. It causes us to make decisions not based on objective reality, but on a beautiful and often misleading illusion. When we are swayed by the halo effect, we fail to critically evaluate an idea or a person's character. We are less likely to question the suggestions of someone we find attractive or charming. We give people we admire a pass on behaviors we would find unacceptable in others. This not only leads to poor decisions, but also fosters an environment where genuine merit can be overlooked in favor of a pleasing facade. We create a world where first impressions, often fleeting and superficial, hold more weight than the enduring reality of a person's character and competence. The transformative reveal of this trap is that a person's true character is not a single, beautiful melody, but an entire, complex symphony. The antidote to the halo effect is a conscious practice of separating your initial impression from your logical evaluation. When you meet someone new, take a moment to acknowledge your first reaction, whether positive or negative. Then, consciously set it aside. Commit to observing their actions, listening to their words, and getting to know them over time before forming a final judgment. In a professional context, this means creating systems to evaluate work based on merit alone, a practice that is often called blind review, where identifying information is removed to prevent bias. In our personal lives, it means giving people a second chance and a deeper look beyond the surface. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a profound clarity of perception and a foundation for deeper relationships. By breaking free from the halo effect, you learn to see people for who they truly are, a messy, complicated, and beautiful mix of strengths and weaknesses. You become a more discerning judge of character, not swayed by superficialities, but grounded in genuine observation. This allows you to build relationships based on a solid foundation of mutual understanding and respect, rather than on the fragile illusion of a perfect first impression. By learning to look past the initial glow, you find the real, enduring light that shines from within. Imagine a majestic eagle soaring high above a canyon. From the ground, its flight appears effortless, powerful, and utterly confident. Yet, what if that eagle, in its own mind, was a small, flightless bird, constantly whispering to itself, "Any moment now, they will see that I don't belong up here. This is a fluke. I am a fraud." This vivid, Internal conflict is the essence of imposter syndrome, a profound psychological trap that makes us feel like a fraud despite overwhelming evidence of our competence and success. It is the persistent, gnawing echo of insecurity that tells us our achievements are a result of luck, a mistake, or deception, and that we will soon be exposed as undeserving. This phenomenon is not an external problem. It is an internal narrative, a dissonance between our perceived self and our external reality. It is most prevalent among high achievers, those who, by all objective measures, are successful, intelligent, and capable. The paradox is that the more a person achieves, the more their inner voice of insecurity often whispers, "The stakes are higher now, the fall will be even greater." This trap is rooted in a fundamental misinterpretation of our own effort and the nature of success. We often attribute our success to external factors. I got lucky. It was an easy project. My boss was just being nice, while attributing our failures to our own inherent lack of ability. This creates a psychological chasm. Our external world is a testament to our skills, but our internal world is a testament to our self-doubt. And the louder the external praise, the wider the chasm feels. We fear that the mask we're wearing, the one that looks like a competent, successful person, will slip, and the real person underneath will be revealed as an imposter. The emotional and professional costs of imposter syndrome are immense. It can prevent us from taking on new challenges, as the fear of being found out becomes too great. It can lead to a cycle of overworking and perfectionism, where we constantly feel the need to prove our worth and prevent any possible mistake that might expose our fraudulence. This leads to burnout and a pervasive sense of anxiety. We may also become reluctant to celebrate our successes, downplaying our achievements and dismissing compliments, which can prevent us from building a healthy sense of self-worth and confidence. The tragedy is that the very traits we fear being exposed, our imperfections, our stumbles, our feelings of not knowing everything, are the very things that make us human. No one, not even the most accomplished person, knows everything or is perfect. Imposter syndrome convinces us that we are the only ones with these feelings, isolating us in a silent world of self-doubt. The transformative reveal of this trap is that no one truly feels like they completely belong, and that is a shared human experience. The antidote to imposter syndrome is not to fix your feelings of inadequacy, but to reframe them. It's about shifting from an emotional reality to a factual one. When the voice whispers, "You're a fraud," you can learn to respond with gentle, factual inquiry. What is the evidence? Where is the objective proof that I am undeserving of this? You can also practice a conscious act of self-compassion, reminding yourself that it's okay to feel uncertain, that it's normal to not have all the answers, and that your worth is not tied to your perceived perfection. Sharing your feelings with a trusted friend, mentor, or therapist can be profoundly liberating, as it often reveals that your experience is far from unique. You discover that the other eagles in the sky have their own quiet whispers of insecurity, too. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a profound sense of self-acceptance and the freedom to embrace your own imperfect journey. By learning to recognize the echo of insecurity for what it is, a flawed and persistent narrative, not a factual truth, you can begin to separate your feelings from your identity. You learn to accept your successes without guilt and to acknowledge your vulnerabilities without shame. You realize that your unique perspective and your ongoing growth are not signs of being a fraud, but signs of being a genuine, evolving human being. By breaking free from the trap of imposter syndrome, you stop fighting against yourself and start to soar. Not because you are perfect, but because you are finally embracing the beautifully imperfect and authentic person you were meant to be. Imagine a towering oak tree, its trunk scarred and gnarled from decades of growth. That tree's form today is a direct result of the storms it weathered, the sun it reached for, and the soil that nourished it over a lifetime. It is a testament to a continuous, ever-changing process. But for us, with our short-sighted perspective on our own lives, we often fall into the end of history illusion. This is a powerful psychological trap, where we believe that our personal growth and evolution have largely concluded. We acknowledge that we've changed significantly in the past, but we mistakenly think that our current beliefs, values, and personality are the final, finished version of ourselves. We see our past self as a work in progress, but our current self as a masterpiece. This bias is a fascinating quirk of our brain's narrative-making function. Our minds are excellent storytellers, and a good story needs a sense of resolution. When we look back on our past selves, the person we were in high school, or 5 years ago, we can clearly see the dramatic changes. We can identify the naive beliefs we've shed, the values we've adopted, and the maturity we've gained. That person feels like a different character in our life's narrative. But when we look at our current self, our brain's narrative concludes. This is it. This is the finished product. The discomfort of the unknown. The idea that our core identity might change drastically in the future is too unsettling. So, we create a myth of a straight line, a belief that from this point forward, our life will be a simple continuation of who we are right now, with no more major detours or transformations. The emotional and practical costs of this trap are profound. It prevents us from making long-term decisions with foresight and humility. We might get a tattoo or a permanent hairstyle based on our current taste, failing to realize that our aesthetic preferences will likely evolve. We might choose a career based on our current passions, not accounting for the fact that our interests will shift. The end of history illusion also stunts our potential for future growth. If we believe we are a finished product, we stop seeking out new perspectives, challenging our assumptions, and learning from new experiences. We become like a tree that stops growing, convinced it has already reached its final, perfect height. This mindset closes the door on the beautiful, messy, and continuous process of becoming. We confuse our current stability with a permanent state, and in doing so, we miss the opportunity to shape the person we could be. The greatest danger of this trap is that it robs us of our own future. It encourages us to live in a static present rather than a dynamic flow of continuous evolution. We forget that our future self is a person with their own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, and that our current actions are shaping their reality. The person we are today is a direct result of the choices our past self made, and the person we will be in 5 or 10 years will be a result of the choices we make now. By denying this simple truth, we lose the power to intentionally guide our own development. We become passive recipients of our future rather than active architects of it. The transformative reveal of this trap is that life is not a straight line to a final destination, but a continuous, winding path of transformation. The antidote to the end of history illusion is the humble and conscious practice of acknowledging that change is the only constant. When making a long-term decision, take a moment to look back and remember all the ways you have changed in the past 5 or 10 years. Then, with that understanding, gently ask yourself, what kind of person might I be in the future? And will this decision still serve that person? This practice helps you to see your current self not as the end of the story, but as the current chapter. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater humility, foresight, and openness. By letting go of the myth of the straight line, you free yourself from the pressure to be a final, perfect version of yourself. You learn to make decisions with a compassionate understanding that your future self is a person who will change, and that your path is not a rigid line, but a beautiful, ever-evolving journey. You become like the oak tree, embracing the process of growth, weathering the storms of change, and knowing that every new experience, every new perspective, and every new choice is simply another chapter in the magnificent, unfinished story of who you are becoming. Imagine a vast, sunlit meadow filled with 1,000 different species of flowers. Each flower is unique and beautiful in its own way. From a distance, this looks like a paradise of boundless opportunity. But for a bee tasked with gathering pollen, this meadow is not a source of joy. It is a source of profound anxiety. The bee spends so much time and energy trying to find the perfect flower, the one with the most nectar, the best pollen, that it often ends up gathering very little, paralyzed by the sheer number of options. This is the essence of the paradox of choice, a powerful psychological trap where an abundance of options, far from being liberating, can actually lead to anxiety, decision paralysis, and a lingering sense of regret over the choices we didn't make. This bias is a direct consequence of our modern world. Our ancestors had very few choices what to eat, where to live, whom to marry. Their lives were simpler, and their decisions were often guided by necessity and limited availability. Today, we are faced with an almost endless array of options in every aspect of our lives, from what to watch on streaming services to what career path to pursue. Our brains, which are hardwired to make decisions from a small, manageable set of options, become overwhelmed. We believe that more choices will lead to a better outcome, and so we relentlessly seek more information, more reviews, and more opinions. Convinced that the perfect option is just one click or one more search away. But the more we search, the more we realize what we might be giving up. Every choice we make is also a choice we don't make. And in a world of infinite possibility, this can lead to a nagging sense of loss, known as choice overload. We may choose an option that is perfectly good, but we are left to wonder if the one we didn't choose was, in fact, better. The emotional and practical costs of the paradox of choice are immense. It can turn simple decisions, like choosing a restaurant, into a stressful ordeal. We may spend more time agonizing over the choice than we do enjoying the meal. This phenomenon is a major contributor to decision fatigue, a state where our ability to make good choices becomes depleted after a long day of making too many small ones. On a larger scale, it can prevent us from committing to major life paths. We may never choose a career because we fear we are closing the door on other possibilities. We may remain in a state of dating paralysis, endlessly swiping through profiles, convinced that a better match is always just around the corner. The golden cage of possibility, with its shiny bars of infinite options, keeps us from ever truly settling into a choice and finding fulfillment in it. It tricks us into believing that the perfect is the enemy of the good, and so we are left with nothing at all. The greatest danger of this trap is that it robs us of contentment. We are constantly comparing what we have to what we could have had, rather than finding joy in the reality of our lives. This can lead to a pervasive sense of dissatisfaction, even when we have made an objectively good choice. The bee that lands on a beautiful, nectar-filled flower can't simply be present in that moment. It is haunted by the thought of all the other flowers it didn't visit. This comparison mindset is a direct consequence of the illusion that there is a perfect choice out there. In reality, most of our choices are not about finding the perfect option, but about making a good one and then committing to making it work. The transformative reveal of this trap is that true freedom is found not in infinite possibility, but in conscious, deliberate limitation. The antidote to the paradox of choice is the intentional practice of setting boundaries and making a decision with a sense of enough. This doesn't mean settling for less, but rather deciding what your criteria are ahead of time and then stopping the search once you find an option that meets them. For example, when you go to buy a new product, decide on your top 3 non-negotiable features, and once you find a product that has them, make the purchase. Another powerful practice is to focus on being a satisficer rather than a maximizer. Maximizers are those who must find the absolute best option, while satisficers are those who find an option that is good enough. Studies show that satisficers are often happier, more content, and feel less regret about their decisions. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater peace, clarity, and contentment. By letting go of the illusion of infinite possibility, you free yourself from the anxiety of comparison and the paralysis of indecision. You learn that making a good choice and committing to it is far more fulfilling than a lifetime of searching for a perfect one that doesn't exist. You become like the wise bee, landing on a beautiful flower, knowing that this moment, this choice, is more than enough to find what you need. In this state of mind, you stop being a prisoner of choice and become the master of your own contentment. Imagine a ship captain attempting to navigate a treacherous coastline. The captain receives a report of a submerged rock at a certain coordinate, a piece of information that is now lodged in their mind. Even if subsequent, more accurate reports show the rock to be elsewhere, the captain's judgment is still heavily influenced by that very first number. They will tend to stay close to that initial coordinate, their decisions anchored to that initial, and possibly irrelevant, piece of information. This vivid image perfectly illustrates the anchoring bias, a powerful psychological trap where our decisions and judgments are disproportionately influenced by the very first piece of information we receive. That first number, like a ship's anchor, holds us in place, even when we have access to a sea of new and better data. This bias is a subtle but powerful mental shortcut that our brains use to navigate uncertainty. When faced with a decision, we often start with a reference point, the anchor, and then adjust our thinking from there. The problem is that our adjustments are often insufficient. For example, if you are negotiating a salary for a new job and the employer offers a low starting number, that number becomes the anchor. Even if you negotiate for a higher salary, your final number will likely be lower than if the employer had started with a higher initial offer. The first number set the frame of the entire negotiation. This phenomenon is not limited to numbers. It can be an initial impression, a first fact presented in a debate, or even an arbitrary number that has no bearing on the situation at all. A famous psychological study demonstrated this by asking participants to estimate the percentage of African countries in the UN after first spinning a wheel of fortune that landed on a random number. Those who landed on a higher number gave significantly higher estimates, even though they knew the number from the wheel was completely random. The number acted as a powerful, subconscious anchor. The emotional and practical costs of the anchoring bias are significant. It can lead to poor financial decisions, as we may overpay for an item simply because the initial price was set artificially high to make a slightly lower price seem like a good deal. In business, it can lead to flawed project estimates and budgets, as the first number proposed for a project often becomes the baseline for all subsequent discussions, regardless of its accuracy. This can lead to a cycle of overspending and unmet expectations. In our personal lives, the first news headline we read on a topic can color our perception of the entire issue, making it difficult to objectively consider opposing viewpoints later on. The anchor holds us in place, preventing us from engaging in fresh, independent thought. We are not making a decision based on all the facts. We are making a decision based on a disproportionate focus on one initial piece of information, a fact that is often not even the most important one. The greatest danger of this trap is that it prevents us from seeing the full picture. Our judgments become skewed, our negotiations are compromised, and our perceptions of the world are distorted by an invisible chain holding us to a starting point. We lose our ability to be flexible and agile in our thinking, and we become vulnerable to those who understand how to use anchoring to their advantage. A clever salesperson, for example, will always present the most expensive option first, making the subsequent, more reasonably priced options seem like a bargain, even if they are still overpriced. We are not consciously aware of this manipulation, but our brains are nonetheless pulled toward that initial high number. The transformative reveal of this trap is that your mind is not a ship bound by an anchor. It is a nimble vessel capable of navigating any waters with the right awareness. The antidote to the anchoring bias is the conscious practice of identifying and questioning the first piece of information you receive. When you encounter a number or an initial piece of information in a negotiation or a decision, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, is this number a relevant and logical starting point, or is it just an arbitrary anchor? It's a practice of mental reframing, of actively seeking out a different, more objective starting point. In a negotiation, for example, you can mentally ignore the initial offer and focus on your own predetermined target number, grounding your position in a more rational, self-defined anchor. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater clarity, objectivity, and control over your decisions. By learning to recognize the influence of the anchor, you can consciously choose to release it. You free yourself from the subconscious influence of first impressions and initial offers, and you ground your decisions in a more solid foundation of logic and careful consideration. You become a captain who is not bound by a single, old report, but one who is constantly and consciously reevaluating the map, navigating toward your true destination with an open mind and a clear, unburdened perspective. Imagine a small, hungry monkey faced with a choice. It can have a single, delicious banana right now, or it can have 2 equally delicious bananas, but it must wait 10 minutes. The monkey, with its powerful instinct for immediate gratification, almost always chooses the single banana now. It discounts the value of the future, larger reward in favor of the immediate, smaller one. This primal decision-making process is a perfect metaphor for the psychological trap of hyperbolic discounting, our powerful preference for instant gratification over future, often larger, rewards. This mental bias is a subtle siren song that keeps us from building long-term habits, achieving in our goals, and investing in our future selves. This bias is deeply rooted in our evolutionary history. For our ancestors, a reward in the future was often a reward that might never materialize. A bird in the hand was, quite literally, worth more than two in the bush. The world was unpredictable and dangerous, and a future reward was not a reliable certainty. Our brains evolved to prioritize the immediate, tangible reward. But in our modern world, where the future is far more predictable, this ancient instinct often works against us. We know, on a rational level, that saving money today will lead to a more secure future, that working out today will lead to better health tomorrow, and that studying tonight will lead to a better grade on the exam. Yet, when faced with the choice between a fleeting, immediate pleasure like a new pair of shoes, a lazy evening on the couch, or a night out with friends, and the delayed reward of a more secure and healthier future, the lure of the instant is often too powerful to resist. The value of the future reward feels as if it is being discounted at a hyperbolic, or rapidly increasing, rate the further away it is, making it feel less and less appealing compared to what we can have right now. The emotional and practical costs of hyperbolic discounting are vast and pervasive. It is the reason we procrastinate on important tasks, choosing the immediate comfort of delay over the future relief of a completed project. It is the reason we struggle with building wealth, choosing to spend money on today's desires rather than saving for tomorrow's needs. This trap also fuels addiction and unhealthy habits. The immediate pleasure of a cigarette, a sugary snack, or a scroll through social media is a powerful force, and our future selves, who will bear the consequences, feel distant and abstract. The person who will have to deal with the health problems, the debt, or the regret is not our present self, and our brain treats them as almost a different person, someone else's problem. We make decisions that our future self will deeply regret, but in the moment, the pleasure feels so real, and the future feels so far away. The greatest danger of this trap is that it robs us of our potential. It keeps us stuck in a cycle of immediate gratification and long-term stagnation. We are constantly making choices that serve our fleeting desires, rather than our enduring goals. The monkey's choice of a single banana now is harmless. But for us, a lifetime of such choices can lead to a profound gap between the person we want to be and the person we actually become. We are not just making a small decision in a single moment. We are, with every choice, casting a vote for the person we are creating. Hyperbolic discounting is the voice that convinces us to vote against our own best interests, whispering that the future is not worth the sacrifice of the present. The transformative reveal of this trap is that your future self is not a stranger. They are a person who deserves your love, your care, and your investment. The antidote to hyperbolic discounting is the conscious practice of closing the gap between your present self and your future self. One powerful way to do this is to make your future self feel more real and present. Write a letter to your future self, outlining your goals and hopes. Create a vision board or a clear image of who you want to be in a year, or 5 years, and look at it every day. Another effective strategy is to implement pre-commitment devices, which are choices you make today that limit the options for your future self. For example, if you want to save money, set up an automatic transfer from your checking to your savings account, so the decision is already made before the temptation to spend arises. If you want to work out, lay out your workout clothes the night before. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater intention and genuine progress. By learning to resist the lure of the instant, you gain a profound sense of self-mastery. You learn to make decisions that are aligned with your deepest values and your long-term vision. You become a person who not only dreams of a better future, but who is actively and consistently building it. One small, intentional choice at a time. By freeing yourself from the trap of hyperbolic discounting, you stop being a servant to your fleeting desires and become the compassionate architect of your own future. Consider a fledgling bird attempting its first flight. It flutters its wings with great confidence, believing itself to be a master of the air, only to stumble and fall to the ground. Meanwhile, a seasoned albatross, capable of soaring across oceans, approaches its flight with a quiet, humble caution, aware of the subtle complexities of the winds. This tale of two birds is a perfect metaphor for the Dunning-Kruger effect, a fascinating psychological trap where those with the least knowledge in a subject often overestimate their abilities, while experts tend to underestimate their own competence. It is a fable of a fickle judge, our own mind, which often delivers a verdict on our skills that is wildly out of sync with reality. This bias arises from a simple, elegant paradox. In order to recognize incompetence in a given field, you must possess a certain level of competence in that very field. An individual who knows very little about a subject lacks the mental framework to even grasp the full scope of what they don't know. They are like the fledgling bird, unaware of the complex physics of flight or the dangers of the wind. They see the easy part, the flapping of wings, and assume that is all there is to it. This leads to an inflated sense of self-confidence and an inability to accurately assess their own performance. The person who has read one book on a complex topic like economics might feel confident enough to argue with an expert, completely unaware of the vast, intricate body of knowledge they are missing. Their confidence is built not on knowledge, but on a profound ignorance of the depth of the subject. Conversely, true expertise often comes with a dose of humility. As a person learns more about a subject, their mental map of that field expands, and they begin to see the immense landscape of what is still unknown. They become aware of the subtle nuances, the competing theories, and the endless possibilities for error. The seasoned albatross, having flown for years, knows the unpredictable nature of the sky. This is why experts often express their opinions with caution and qualification, using phrases like, "it's complicated," or, "on the one hand," but on the other. Their knowledge isn't a source of unshakable certainty. It's a source of profound awareness of the uncertainty that exists. This can lead to a phenomenon where experts underestimate their own abilities, assuming that if a concept is simple to them, it must be simple for everyone else, and that their vast knowledge is nothing special. The emotional and professional costs of the Dunning-Kruger effect are significant. It can lead to poor leadership, as the overconfident but incompetent individual may be more likely to speak up and take charge, while the truly capable person remains silent. It can also lead to a lack of genuine learning. The person who believes they are already an expert will not be open to feedback or new information, remaining stuck in a cycle of confident incompetence. The greatest danger of this trap is that it prevents us from seeing ourselves and our abilities with honesty and clarity. It creates a false hierarchy where confidence is mistaken for competence and humility is mistaken for weakness. This can cause us to make poor decisions, both in our own lives and for the organizations we lead, all because we have trusted the verdict of a fickle judge within our own minds. The transformative reveal of this trap is that a profound sense of not knowing is often the first step on the path to true wisdom. The antidote to the Dunning-Kruger effect is the conscious practice of intellectual humility. It is the willingness to approach every new situation with a beginner's mind, assuming that there is always more to learn. It means actively seeking out feedback from others, particularly from those who know more than you do, and listening with a genuine desire to understand, not to defend. It is the practice of seeing your own certainty, not as a sign of mastery, but as a potential red flag that you may be missing something important. A helpful question to ask yourself is, what if I'm wrong? What would I need to learn to find out? The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of continuous, genuine growth. By learning to recognize the signs of the Dunning-Kruger effect, you free yourself from the shackles of false confidence and the burden of intellectual arrogance. You learn to value the process of learning over the need to appear smart. You become like the albatross, approaching your journey with a humble awareness of the subtle complexities, knowing that true wisdom is not about having all the answers, but about a lifelong and gentle curiosity for the questions. In this state of mind, you stop being a fickle judge and start being a diligent student. And in doing so, you embark on the path to a profound and enduring expertise. Imagine a lone wolf howling at the moon, certain that every other creature in the forest must hear and agree with its mournful call. It assumes that its own perspective, its own experience, is the universal truth. This profound mistake, the belief that one's own internal world is shared by all, is the essence of the false consensus effect, a psychological trap where we mistakenly overestimate how much others share our beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. This trap makes us feel more normal than we truly are, but at the cost of genuine understanding and connection. This bias is a powerful shortcut our brains use to navigate a complex social world. We are surrounded by our own thoughts, opinions, and habits, and it's a monumental task to constantly remember that everyone else has their own entirely different internal world. So, our minds create a convenient illusion, a mirror where we see our own beliefs reflected in others. We use our own experiences as a reference point for all of humanity. If we believe that a certain movie is a cinematic masterpiece, we are more likely to assume that most people feel the same way. If we agree with a political opinion, we are more likely to believe that the majority of the population holds that same view. This is not a conscious act of arrogance. It's a cognitive bias that makes our world feel more predictable and safe. We seek comfort in the idea that we are not alone in our way of thinking, and the false consensus effect provides that comfort, even if it is built on a misperception. The emotional and social costs of this trap are immense. It can lead to a profound sense of isolation and shock when we are confronted with a different perspective. We might feel personally offended or betrayed when a friend doesn't share our opinion on a deeply held belief, because our internal mirror has been shattered. The false consensus effect can also lead us to make poor decisions in group settings. We might fail to adequately explain our reasoning for a decision. Assuming that the other people in the room already share our underlying assumptions, this lack of clear communication can lead to misunderstanding and conflict. In a work environment, a leader might propose a solution, assuming everyone will see the obvious benefits, without realizing that a significant portion of the team has different values or priorities that make the solution unappealing. By assuming consensus, we stifle genuine discussion and the opportunity for a more robust and inclusive decision. The greatest danger of this trap is that it prevents genuine empathy and connection. When we are caught in the false consensus effect, we stop being curious about others' perspectives. We are not listening to understand. We are listening to find confirmation of our own beliefs. The world becomes a vast echo chamber, where every person we meet is either a reflection of ourselves or a flawed exception to the rule. We lose the ability to see people for the unique, diverse individuals they are, and we become incapable of truly stepping into another's shoes. We are like the wolf, howling at the moon and believing that our own solitary experience is a shared, universal truth, while the rest of the forest is simply going about its own business, oblivious to our call. This disconnect leaves us feeling misunderstood and creates a chasm between our internal world and the external reality. The transformative reveal of this trap is that the world is far more diverse and interesting than the reflection in your own mirror. The antidote to the false consensus effect is a conscious and compassionate practice of humble inquiry. It is the intentional act of approaching every conversation with a sense of genuine curiosity, assuming that the other person's perspective is different from your own and that their difference is a source of learning, not a source of conflict. Instead of saying, "Everyone thinks this," try asking, "What do you think about this, and why?" This simple shift in language forces you to move from an assumption of shared reality to an exploration of unique perspectives. Another powerful practice is to actively seek out diverse groups of people. People who don't look like you, don't think like you, and don't share your background. This exposure is a gentle and powerful way to break the mirror of your own beliefs and begin to see the world as it truly is. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater empathy, a deeper understanding of the world, and a profound sense of genuine connection. By letting go of the need for others to be a reflection of yourself, you free yourself from the burden of assuming universal agreement. You learn to celebrate the beautiful diversity of human thought and experience. You become a person who is not just listening, but truly hearing. By breaking free from the mirror of your own beliefs, you find that the world is not a solitary forest, but a vibrant, interconnected ecosystem. And your unique perspective is just one beautiful voice in a magnificent chorus. Imagine a vast green lawn with a single small patch of brown dead grass. A person walking across the lawn, when asked what they see, will almost invariably point to the brown patch, describing it in detail, even though it represents a tiny fraction of the entire beautiful landscape. The green grass, the vibrant flowers, and the rustling trees fade into the background, while the single imperfection becomes the focus of their attention. This powerful image is a perfect metaphor for the negativity bias, a fundamental psychological trap where our brains have an innate tendency to register and dwell on negative experiences more deeply and for longer than positive ones. We are like a magnet drawn more to the rust than to the polished metal of our lives. This bias is deeply rooted in our brain's ancient survival mechanisms. In the wild, paying attention to a threat, the sound of a predator, the bitter taste of a poisonous plant is far more crucial for survival than savoring a pleasant experience. A single negative event could mean death, while a single positive one might just be a fleeting pleasure. Our brains evolved to be hypervigilant to potential dangers, and this vigilance is still active today. Even in a world where the dangers are no longer lions and poisonous berries. This is why a single harsh criticism can feel so much more powerful and linger for so much longer than a dozen compliments. We may have a wonderful day, filled with small joys and successes, but a single negative comment from a colleague can completely overshadow it, becoming the singular memory we carry with us into the evening. Our minds have a Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity, a simple but effective phrase coined by psychologist Rick Hanson. The negative experiences stick, while the positive ones slide right off, and this imbalance creates a skewed, often pessimistic, view of our own lives and the world around us. The emotional and practical costs of the negativity bias are immense. It is a major contributor to anxiety, stress, and dissatisfaction. By constantly focusing on the negative, we train our brains to be on the lookout for problems, which, in turn, makes us more likely to find them. This can create a self-perpetuating cycle of pessimism. It can also sabotage our relationships. We might overlook a partner's hundreds of small acts of kindness, but become obsessed with the one time they were thoughtless. This focus on the negative erodes trust and intimacy, and can lead us to believe that our relationships and our lives are far more flawed than they actually are. In the workplace, it can make it difficult to receive constructive feedback, as the single negative comment can completely negate all the positive praise, leaving us feeling unappreciated and demoralized. We are not seeing the full picture. We are seeing only the brown patch on the green lawn, and our perception of the entire lawn is therefore fundamentally flawed. The greatest danger of this trap is that it robs us of our joy and our gratitude. When we are constantly looking for what is wrong, we become incapable of seeing what is right. We become so focused on the single piece of rust that we fail to appreciate the beautiful, polished strength of the entire metal. This prevents us from building a robust sense of resilience and optimism. We become emotionally fragile, easily knocked off balance by a single setback, because our minds have not been trained to hold on to and find strength in the countless positive moments that still exist. We live in a world of our own making, a world that is far more bleak than the beautiful, vibrant reality that surrounds us. The transformative reveal of this trap is that you have the power to consciously rewire your own mind. The antidote to the negativity bias is a deliberate and consistent practice of savoring positive moments. This doesn't mean ignoring the negative. It means giving equal weight and attention to the good. When something good happens, no matter how small a warm cup of coffee, a kind word from a stranger, a beautiful sunset, take a moment to pause. Consciously notice it. Feel the good feelings it creates in your body and mind, and let it sink in for 20 or 30 seconds. This simple act trains your brain to create stronger neural pathways for positivity. Another powerful practice is to keep a gratitude journal, where you write down 3 good things that happened each day. This forces your mind to actively search for the good, shifting its focus from the brown patches to the green lawn. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater resilience, gratitude, and genuine joy. By learning to consciously counteract your brain's innate bias, you gain a sense of control over your own emotional landscape. You learn to see the full, nuanced picture of your life, acknowledging the imperfections without letting them overshadow the beauty. You become like the wise observer who sees the brown patch but is not blind to the vast green lawn that surrounds it. In this state of mind, you stop being a silent collector of grievances and become a grateful curator of joy. And in doing so, you find a deep, enduring sense of peace and contentment. Imagine a small, rustic lighthouse standing proudly on a rocky coast. For 100 years, it has stood against countless storms, a testament to its builder's skill and its enduring strength. Visitors come from all over to admire its resilience, and designers study its structure, convinced that this is the perfect model for a long-lasting lighthouse. What they don't see, however, are the hundreds of other lighthouses that were built just like it, but that have since crumbled into the sea. They are drawing their conclusions from the survivors alone, a profound mistake that perfectly illustrates the trap of survivorship bias. This is our tendency to draw conclusions from a dataset of successful outcomes, while completely ignoring the countless failures that never made it to the surface. This cognitive bias is a subtle form of historical revisionism, where we focus on the visible successes and fail to account for the invisible failures. The most famous example of this comes from World War II. During the war, statisticians were asked to determine where to add armor to planes to protect them from enemy fire. They studied the planes that returned from combat and noted that the bullet holes were concentrated on the wings and the fuselage. Their initial conclusion was to add armor to these areas. However, a statistician named Abraham Wald pointed out the flaw in their reasoning. They were only studying the planes that survived. The planes that were shot in the engines or the cockpit never made it back. The bullet holes they were observing were in the areas that could sustain damage and still return. The true lesson was to add armor to the areas where there were no bullet holes on the returning planes, as those were the critical points of failure. The survivors were telling a story not of where they were weak, but of where they were strong enough to endure a hit. The emotional and practical costs of survivorship bias are immense. We see the stories of successful entrepreneurs who dropped out of college, and then we draw the conclusion that a college education is not necessary for success, while completely ignoring the millions of college dropouts whose businesses failed. We read a self-help book written by a person who achieved a certain goal, and we follow their advice to the letter, believing their path is the only path, without considering the countless people who followed the same path and failed. We are, in essence, listening to the stories of the lighthouses that survived the storms and ignoring the silent sunken ships that did not. This bias leads us to create an idealized and often inaccurate roadmap for success, one that is built on an incomplete set of data. It breeds a false sense of what is truly possible and what is required to get there, making us susceptible to oversimplification and naive optimism. The greatest danger of this trap is that it distorts our understanding of reality and distorts our ability to learn from failure. The lessons learned from a failure are often more valuable than the lessons learned from a success. But if we are only listening to the stories of the survivors, we are missing the majority of the information. We don't see the crucial mistakes that were made, the unforeseen obstacles that arose, or the luck that played a role in the outcome. This can lead us to repeat the same mistakes, believing our path is a new one, when, in fact, it is a path that countless others have already traveled and failed on. We are blinded by the bright light of success and deaf to the silent lessons of the fallen. The transformative reveal of this trap is that the true wisdom lies not only in studying the successes, but in also intentionally seeking out and learning from the failures. The antidote to survivorship bias is a deliberate practice of asking, "What am I not seeing?" or "Who is missing from this story?" When you are studying a successful person or a successful company, don't just focus on their victories. Actively seek out the stories of their struggles, their mistakes, and their failures. In a business context, this might mean not just studying the companies that have made it, but also conducting a failure analysis on those that didn't, trying to understand the variables that led to their demise. In your personal life, it might mean reading biographies not just of the heroes, but also of the flawed, complex figures who stumbled and fell. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater humility, clearer foresight, and a more robust understanding of the world. By learning to look beyond the survivors, you free yourself from the misleading illusion of the average. You learn that success is not a simple, clean path, but a messy and often chaotic journey, and that failure is not the end of the story, but an invaluable source of data. You become a person who is not just inspired by the light of the lighthouse, but is also wise enough to heed the silent warnings of the ships that have already sunk. In this state of mind, your path becomes not a naive imitation, but a well-informed, resilient, and enduring journey. Imagine a child holding a smooth, ordinary stone they found on the beach. To an adult, it's just a rock, with little to no monetary value. But to the child, that stone is a precious treasure, a prized possession, imbued with a powerful sense of personal worth simply because they own it. The child would likely not trade it for a similar, or even a slightly prettier stone. This simple human moment perfectly illustrates the endowment effect, a powerful psychological trap where we overvalue things simply because we own them. This bias makes it incredibly difficult to let go of possessions, ideas, or even relationships, as we mistake our emotional attachment for a true measure of value. This phenomenon is a direct consequence of our loss aversion. As discussed earlier, the pain of losing something feels far more intense than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. The moment we acquire something, whether it's an object, a belief, or a relationship, it becomes a part of our psychological endowment. This ownership creates an emotional attachment, and the prospect of losing that item feels like a threat to our very self. So, we place a higher value on what we own compared to what we don't. A value that is often completely disconnected from its objective market price or its true utility. For example, a person trying to sell their old car will often believe it is worth more than the market dictates, because they are including the emotional value of the memories they have with it. A buyer, on the other hand, sees only the car's objective value, a worn-out vehicle with an inflated price. The owner and the buyer are not looking at the same object. One is looking at a memory. The other is looking at a machine. The emotional and practical costs of the endowment effect are pervasive. It is the reason we hoard things we don't need, clinging to old clothes, outdated technology, and sentimental trinkets because we feel the weight of their past rather than assessing their current worth. This clutter can physically and mentally constrict our lives. In business and finance, it can lead to poor decision-making. A person might refuse to sell a stock that is performing poorly because they have owned it for so long, and the thought of realizing a loss feels too painful. This emotional attachment prevents them from making a rational, objective decision based on the stock's future potential. In our personal lives, this bias can keep us in relationships, friendships, or jobs that are no longer serving us. We feel the weight of the years we have invested, the shared history, and the emotional connection, and we assign a greater value to them than their current state dictates. We hold on to the weight of the past, even as it pulls us down. The greatest danger of this trap is that it prevents us from moving forward. By clinging to the things we own, the objects, the ideas, and the people, we fill our lives with what is, leaving no room for what could be. The clutter in our homes is a physical manifestation of this. The mental clutter of old beliefs and outdated routines is just as damaging. We become a prisoner of our own history, unable to shed the old to make way for the new. We are like the person who refuses to leave an old, rotting house because of all the memories inside, failing to see the beautiful, new home that could be built on the very same plot of land. The transformative reveal of this trap is that your worth is not defined by what you own, and that true freedom lies in the ability to let go. The antidote to the endowment effect is a deliberate practice of conscious reassessment. When you are faced with a decision about whether to keep something, an object, an idea, or a relationship, ask yourself a simple but powerful question. If I didn't already own this, would I be willing to buy it today? This question forces you to remove the emotional weight of ownership and to evaluate the item based on its present-day value and utility. Another effective strategy is to practice decluttering, not just of physical objects, but of mental beliefs. Consciously identify an outdated belief you hold and ask yourself if it is still serving you, or if you are simply clinging to it because it is yours. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of greater freedom, clarity, and intentionality. By learning to let go of the weight of the past, you free up physical space, mental energy, and emotional resources. You learn that your value is not tied to your possessions, and that releasing something is not a loss of self, but an act of self-respect. You become like the wise person who can appreciate the beauty of the old stone without needing to own it. And in doing so, you create space for new, more valuable treasures to enter your life. By breaking free from the trap of the endowment effect, you stop living in the past and begin to live a life of possibility, lightness, and true abundance. Imagine a traveler on a hot, arid desert road. They are thirsty, and the only thing they can think about is a cold drink. When they see a person in the distance, their mind, consumed by their own need, cannot truly fathom what the other person might be feeling or thinking. The traveler assumes the other person's state of mind is identical to their own, that their reality is the only reality. This profound inability to truly step outside of our own temporary emotional state is the essence of the empathy gap, a powerful psychological trap where we consistently fail to accurately understand or predict the emotional state of another person, or even our future selves. When we are in a different emotional state, it is an echo of the empty, a quiet but significant chasm between our feelings and our ability to truly connect with others. This bias is a fascinating quirk of our hot-cold empathy. When we are in a hot state, angry, hungry, joyful, or in a state of high arousal, we are profoundly disconnected from our ability to empathize with someone in a cold, neutral state, and vice versa. The hot, visceral feeling of the present moment becomes so consuming that it fills the entire landscape of our perception. We simply cannot remember what it feels like to be in a different emotional state. For example, in a moment of anger, it's incredibly difficult to recall what it feels like to be calm. When we are calm, we can easily dismiss a past moment of anger as irrational, failing to truly understand the powerful, all-consuming feeling that drove our actions. This same gap applies to how we view others. A person who is not hungry cannot truly fathom the overpowering feeling of hunger that drives a starving person. A person who is not in love cannot truly understand the seemingly irrational decisions of someone who is. This gap is not a failure of character. It is a limitation of our current emotional state. Our present feeling becomes an echo chamber, and we are unable to hear any other voices, even our own, from a different time. The emotional and practical costs of the empathy gap are immense. It is a primary source of misunderstanding and conflict in our relationships. In an argument, we are both in a hot state, and we each fail to truly understand the other's perspective. We assume the other person is being unreasonable or cold from our vantage point, but we fail to see that their hot state is just as real and consuming as our own. This leads to a cycle of defensiveness and a profound sense of not being heard. The empathy gap can also lead to poor decisions for our future selves. In a moment of comfort and complacency, a cold state, we might fail to save money or make a healthy choice, because the future pain of being broke or unwell feels abstract and unreal. Our present self, in this moment of comfort, cannot truly empathize with the future self who will be in a state of need or suffering. The echo of the empty leaves us making choices that our future self will deeply regret, because we have been unable to bridge the emotional distance between now and then. The greatest danger of this trap is that it prevents us from building bridges, both to others and to our future selves. It leaves us in a state of profound emotional isolation. Even when we are surrounded by people, we become so trapped in our own emotional world that we forget that everyone else is just as trapped in theirs. The thirsty traveler on the desert road is not cold-hearted. They are simply unable to access the emotional state of a person who is not thirsty. This lack of empathy, while not malicious, can lead to a world that feels disconnected, where we are all living on separate islands, shouting across a chasm of emotional misunderstanding. The transformative reveal of this trap is that we can consciously learn to bridge the emotional chasm, even when our feelings are at their most intense. The antidote to the empathy gap is a deliberate practice of emotional humility. This means acknowledging that your current feelings, no matter how real they feel, are not the full picture. When you are in a hot state, learn to pause and say to yourself, I am feeling angry right now, and this is coloring my entire perspective. I know that when I am calm, I will see the situation differently. This simple act of verbalizing the gap can create a small but powerful space for empathy. When dealing with others, a powerful question to ask yourself is, what would this feel like from their perspective? Especially if their feelings are the opposite of mine. This forces your mind to consciously move out of its own emotional state and into theirs. The benefit of applying this wisdom is a life of deeper understanding, greater compassion, and more resilient relationships. By learning to recognize the echo of the empty, you gain the ability to navigate your own emotional landscape with greater awareness and to connect with others with a profound sense of grace. You learn that your emotions are a signal, not a sole reality, and that the path to a deeper connection is found not in a shared state of feeling, but in a shared state of understanding that we all, at times, fail to truly see beyond our own emotional world. By breaking free from this trap, you stop being a prisoner of your own feelings and become a compassionate bridge builder in a world that desperately needs connection. We have journeyed through 24 distinct landscapes of the mind, and I hope that in each one, you found not a cold lesson, but a warm melody of recognition. We've seen how our minds, in their effort to protect and simplify, often create unseen traps that can limit our potential and our joy. We've explored the silent siren of the sunk cost, the echo chamber of confirmation bias, the illusion of the spotlight, and the weight of the past. These are not flaws. They are simply cognitive shortcuts, the ancient, yielding, weathered pathways our brains have been traveling for millennia. But now, you are no longer a passive passenger on these paths. The key to navigating these traps is not to eliminate them, for they are a fundamental part of our human operating system, but to recognize them. Awareness is the first and most crucial step toward change. It is the moment you see the shimmering mirage on the horizon and realize it is not a real body of water, but a trick of the light. Once you name the trap, you can begin to make a different choice. You can learn to pause, to breathe, and to ask a simple question. Is this a trap I am falling into? This question is a beacon of light in the fog of a cognitive bias, a gentle reminder that you have the power to choose a new path. This journey of self-awareness is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about learning to be a compassionate observer of your own mind, to watch its patterns and its shortcuts without judgment. It is about understanding that your thoughts and feelings are not always objective reality, and that you have the power to create a space between the impulse and the action. By doing so, you can begin to live a life that is not dictated by the silent traps of the mind, but guided by your deepest values, your truest intentions, and your most authentic self. This is the power of psychology, not as an academic subject, but as a tool for personal growth. It is the key that unlocks the golden cage of possibility and allows you to build a life of intention and peace. The mind, once a source of unseen traps, can become your greatest ally, a landscape not of hidden dangers, but of endless discovery. The melody of your life is not a predetermined tune. It is a symphony that you are now empowered to conduct.